Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of our Innovation Live, coming to you. Sorry, little technical issue here with another sound stream coming in here. But first of all, Laura, welcome. Who do we have on our show today?
We have the one and only Frank Sentner from Sentwood Consulting. And with us today, we have Wendy Aarons-Corman from OWIT Global. So welcome both of you to the show today. I love the clapping for one another. It just shows how strong and connected the ecosystem is. So let's start off, not that you need much of an introduction, but Frank, let's start with you. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm a consultant, as you mentioned, work for myself, have for the last 24 years. I started out in 1976, so 40 plus years, 44 years ago. Strictly speaking, insurance technology all the way. And I had my own company, merged it, sold it, and have been on my own, as I said, for the last 24 years. The last 5 years or so, I pivoted towards working primarily with startups. I still have a corporate client, our industry data standards organization, Accord, but the rest of my clients are all startups, and I predominantly work for equity, not pay at this point in time. And Wendy is one of my clients.
Hopefully you picked a good one.
I did.
I think you did. So Wendy, we've had you on a podcast before, and welcome back, and maybe just tell give people an overview of kind of who you are and what you've done, and it's
Sure.
You've had a very interesting career.
Yeah, it's been a really great career. My name is Wendy Aarons-Corman. I am the CEO of a company called OWIT Global. OWIT stands for One World Insurance Technology, and it actually, in slang, it means I want that, which is a nice marketing item. So my career, I started actually as a software developer. I started in the insurance industry, an industry that I said I would never get into because I think at the time it was COBOL driven. But I found a nice little startup insurance company in Simsbury, Connecticut that needed developers for C#, and they were doing SQL language, relational databases, and which was state of the art at the time. And I had the opportunity to get in there, learn all about insurance. I was there for about 10 years. And then I went over to to join a group of guys that had created this really cool technology that I was excited about and absolutely knew the industry had to adopt. It was called Duck Creek Technologies. Great group of guys. Real small group that had left AMS and decided to create a new product set, product configuration concept, XML, tool-based, first one in the industry. So I joined them. I was the only extrovert. I was a software developer, but I was an extrovert, so I became business development. So that's how I sort of got my way onto that track. Someone took me by the hand, said, "You'd be really great at that." And, I really enjoyed it because it was just about having conversations with people and finding the right match. So we had a really great run. Obviously, I read today that Duck Creek took another investment. They're a massive organization, good for them. And so since then, I've done some consulting work on the carrier side for strategic IT strategy. I've done work for business development on the vendor side. I had joined another software company, a responsive technology company, brought that into the industry. We were acquired. And then 2 years ago, I was asked to join a group of people as we looked at creating a startup company to provide more solutions and more options into the industry that was, really has a ton of legacy systems, which is great. But how do we get people to, take advantage of those legacy systems, extend them, and potentially not have to always replace them? Let's come up with some options. So a bunch of us got together. There's actually was 3 of us from Duck Creek. And we decided microservices was the way to go. For the architecture, it's very open. These small autonomous pieces can stand alone versus an object-oriented programming. You have to rely on each other. gave the carriers options to basically, extend the legacy by connecting to these microservices, or have new solutions by connecting the microservices together. So we started that in 2018. Last year, we acquired 2 customers, Seneca and Crum and Forster, and I can talk a little bit about those implementations. And this year we're having a very good year. It's been a great people. People really are beginning to understand what microservices are, but we have a lot of work to do in educating them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's technology that's been around for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
APIs have been forever. Frank, you've been at a few events when I mentioned it, and people have said, "You've got to be kidding me! You're talking about APIs." But it's Wendy. It's incredibly powerful technology, and I think the problem you're addressing is a big one, right? Like I've got all these legacy systems. How do I ever financially port them over to sort of modern, some of the modern platforms?
Right.
This is a way to do it, right? Like, I mean, that's the problem you're solving is how do I leapfrog my company into the 2020s without spending $1 billion in technology rewrites. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, if you look at it from buying individual microservices to extend the legacy systems, you're extending those systems so that they can connect to other systems and, other distributions or other ecosystems. And when I talk to prospects, it's really about the fact that, we live in this world where, we focus on what we know all the time and we respond or react to that. But with microservices, you'll be able to you'll be prepared for the futures because we just don't know what the ecosystems look like. So good example of that is agency portals. So agency portals, when we had the internet, the agency portals started. There were companies that just did agency portals. And they're still important. I think carriers are beginning to create, they're still creating them. They're looking at, how do I create a single user experience? So we've gone from agency portal to user experience, really focusing on being able to get to multiple disparate backend systems and be able to create a single view or a single experience for the broker. Microservices can do that, right? But it's not just that, it's also the future. Will the portals even be around? That's a big question. I've been talking to a large carrier about a headless, agency gateway, right? Microservices can do that, right?
Right.
So instead of going on to the individual portals anymore, now it has to be send the data back and forth, and all these conditions have to run through the organization in order to get a quote, right? Or call a third party, whatever it might be. So that whole idea behind portals, I think might, it might eventually dissolve, and, if you look at, you look at the demographics of those who are buying insurance in the future, i.e. like my 26-year-old daughter, she's not going to necessarily go to a portal
right
to get insurance. She's going to go to an aggregator, or she's, she's going to go to her mobile phone and she's going to try to find it by Googling, auto insurance. So that becomes an ecosystem that we have to play in. Yep. And so microservices can support today and then the future of what we just don't know is going to happen. On the flip side, just to talk about the solution side of it, because a lot of carriers buy based on solution. When you combine microservices, they create solutions. And so if you're buying products or solutions that are based on microservices, there's a lot of value there in terms of, obviously tactically to get product to market, but strategically, because if you want to replace individual pieces over time, you can do that versus replacing the whole legacy. So what we're proposing is a way to get to prepare for that future, but also to do that at a price point that is extremely lower than what people are used to spending now, because legacy systems, large policy systems, if you implement that, you have to replace the whole thing. It's a huge undertaking. So we're trying to go in and figure out what the price points are and get more value to the carrier, at a lower price point. And we think over time that will cause the pricing models to come down too. Yeah. To be beneficial from an ROI perspective, obviously. So.
Yeah, no, we've dealt with it, and as we've acquired, a number of companies. Now we just actually rebuilt our agent portal, but it was on Amazon Web Services, and really,
Sure.
it's a presentation layer architected with microservices. Now, what's fascinating is we start to outsource some of our platform to different providers. You think some of these big companies, these big providers would have, of course, they have APIs. Wendy, they don't.
No,
How
no, they
long?
don't.
This idea, microservices, I think if we looked up this right, Frank, it's got to have been, I mean, was this 1980s, 1990s? I mean, when did the concept actually come up? This is not new, right?
Yeah, there are very few ideas in any sector that are truly new. What is different about microservices at this time is the adoption rate. And the folks that are doing it, in my capacity as a consultant working with Accord, I work on their digital standards, next generation digital standards team, which is developing microservices, API specifications, and JSON schemas. They're leveraging their legacy of really rich content that they have defined over decades and putting it to work for specific use cases. And a major insurer here locally had developed APIs and microservices to link their 12 mainframes internally. I'm not exaggerating. The advantages they found as they went through the development process in terms of the reusability of the code and the lack of testing that was required for reusing components, one iteration after another, was absolutely stunning to them. And this is an organization that's done their own internal development for many years. They bought packages. They have one of everything. And subsequently, after having integrated those 12 mainframes, the response time went from, better than a second to a second and a half to render a web page to sub-second response time. I mean, a minute to a minute and a half to render a web page to sub-second response time. And both the improvements in development speed and the lowering of the costs associated with that and the improvements in performance really stunned them. And that's when they came to Accord and said, we want to take this technology and face it out towards our agents, towards our insureds. And how do we do that? What language, not language, but what glossary of terms do we use, which is what Accord could contribute. So I know that Wendy and OWIT Global are in the right place. Every insurance carrier has now got projects up and running to develop this type of technology. And so it's really interesting that Wendy finds herself as CEO of Duck Creek in very much the same position of OWIT Global, in very much the same position she was when she was in charge of Duck Creek business development. Right. It's the same scenario. The technologies have now emerged to the point where they're beginning to get adoption. It is an educational process. There's no question about that. But when organizations are turning to Accord to help them integrate with their partners, it's reached critical mass. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Wendy, my experience has been with any of the technology. It's I don't care if it's marketing, if it's back end operations, and to really make use of the technology, you got to have actually put people against it. You've probably changed your organization structure. So, okay, we want to get serious tomorrow about building out a library of microservices. You're headless. By the way, total believer in what you're pitching for all the reasons Frank said, doing apps, working with partners, you need to do this. What do I have to do organizationally? Because now you're talking about not only creating all these APIs, but I've got to maintain them. I've got to have a library. I've got to manage permissions. How do I do that?
Well, if you're talking about taking on, insurance specific, let's do a use case, for example, of taking on you want to take the broker portal as an example. So let's say you want to use a bunch of microservices to create this user experience, right? And so it consists of a user experience microservice, a rule service, and an integration service, right? Those are the three microservices that would need to come together on our part to get you to get connected. In terms of the actual user experience part of it, and this is, our solution is a no code environment, literally no code. I know people talk about low code, no code, but we are a no code environment, and we demonstrate that very well. So for that particular aspect of it, it needs a person who understands. It's not an IT guy. It's a person who can develop the screens and the workflow pertaining to getting insurance. So someone who has some sort of a BA or an underwriting background. Sometimes it's a marketing person involved in all that kind of stuff. So that's the type of resources that are needed there. On the integration side, what we do is we create those connectors for the integration. So all you have to do in our microservice, our integration microservice, is configure those data elements that have to go back and forth, right? So it's all, again, no code. There's some workflow involved in that. There's data elements. It's drag and drop. So that's also, it would probably be someone who, if it's a third party integration, it might be someone who understands that third party. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be IT guy. But when you get to the back end and we're producing the data that's going out to maybe your policy system or maybe your ODS or something like that, we just need to know what that data needs to look like so that in that no code environment, you can create that outgoing data. So yes, you still need people who are going to be able to maintain, you know, the consumption of data, whether it's going in or out. But overall, within the microservices world, it should be a no code environment. So hopefully I answered that question.
Oh, yeah.
For you. Well,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and Wendy's organization is a worldwide organization. When she says one world, she means it. And they were already positioned to be able to work in our, you know, post-pandemic world where, you know, going to the office is, forget optional, you know, it doesn't happen, you know. And in terms of maintaining the code base, it's not that different from what we used to do when we had, you know, the libraries where you check things and check in and check them out for COBOL programming. That technology, in terms of maintaining the code base, has been around forever, as long as there have been, you know, software.
And, you know, and the other thing about, you know, this whole pandemic, so obviously, you know, people had to figure out how to disperse and work, right? So we had to, every vendor had implications for that. But what we also found was that people weren't making very large decisions, right? Because now, and not only they have to figure out how to disperse, it's like, how do we get them back in, right? Now we're focusing on how to get it. But actually, we've been really busy. I think that people are looking at small pieces that they have to take care of that are not large cost and time. And so because of that, we've been having a lot of conversations with people. And one of the things I just wanted to mention was one of the areas that we found, which is a very underserved marketplace, is bordereau management.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you could just explain for people what is that?
Yeah. I will explain to it. So a lot of carriers work with distributions on letting them write business on their behalf. And so the data sets that come in from those, they're called managing general underwriters or agents. Data comes in a spreadsheet, or it might come in a file format. They have all of these data files coming in, and they're all in just different formats in a lot of cases, because as the companies grow and they have other MGAs coming on, they might take on their format versus telling them what to do. So all these data sets have been coming up into these organizations for years. And what I have found out, I actually found this out during a consulting project before I joined OWIT, was that a lot of carriers are dealing with this data manually. They're taking the data, you're trying to fill it in and make sure it's the right format and sending it back and saying, you got to fix this piece, you know, and then back and forth until they get the data right and they can push it into their back end system, right? So we created a bordereau management solution based on microservices, all reusable components. If someone wants to do a different project with the pieces, but it consumes, it cleanses, it logs, it allows the MGA to come in and fix it, or the carrier can fix it, and then it pushes it to an ODS or a policy admin system, whatever it needs to be. Incredible amount of opportunity there, and for ROI, oh my God, total ROI for any carrier who looks at it. But in terms of going out into the market at this time, we have found that this is a really good time for people to take a look at that and look at something that they can, you know, create efficiencies with. And it's from pandemic or not, it's been we've been talking to a lot of carriers about fixing that problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your company too, just to switch gears just
Sure.
a little bit. So, yes, you're a startup, but you're not the typical startup at this time. You started in when 2018, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, tell us how many offices, where,
Sure.
what's the size of your operation at this point?
Sure. So we have about 40 people. We have about 50, by the time we finish a few hires here in the Hartford area, we'll have about 15 people in the US. We'll have 4 people in the UK, and then we have the majority of the people, about 20 people, 22 in Hyderabad, India. And so in 2018, we formed early year. In the fall of 2018, we ended up acquiring a legacy policy admin solution called Unirisk. And we found that to be an opportunity because, not because of the IP or the software, we weren't going to sell it. It had to do with the customers and the team, some of the members of the team. So we took that on, and there were 7 customers that came to us with the acquisition. And I would say at least within a year's time, everyone was settled. All their issues were taken care of, and we had great relationships with these customers. Aside from the fact that we had revenue coming in, right? So a lot of the Hyderabad team takes care of the legacy environment for now until we figure out how to migrate people onto the microservices platform, which will be over a period of time. We do have people in Hyderabad that are developing in Java, and we have some .NET development team there as well. Amazing manager of that team, wonderful guy, great senior manager. In the UK, we have a gentleman named Julian James, who I worked with at Duck Creek when we went overseas into the UK. Julian was hired to be me over there. So I worked with him on getting the office up, and that was a really great time. I mean, it's wonderful to be working with him again. He's an amazing guy, really bright. So he leads the team over there. We have our chief product officer over there. We have some IT guys and sales. And we have some big customers over there like Beasley that we're maintaining. And in the US, we're based out of the Hartford, Connecticut area. So right now we're in West Hartford. We were actually going out looking for an office in the Farmington Valley, obviously on hold. But we have our .NET development team is here. Our chief innovation officer, his name is Ethan Whitaker. He's up in Maine. I met him at Duck Creek. We acquired his billing system. He's an amazing technologist. He is able to see things the way they should be versus the way that we do things, the way that we think that they should be done. He's an out-of-the-box thinker. So that's how we have some amazing products, because of Ethan. And we have some amazing business analysts, very versed. Let's call them seasoned. We're a little bit older, but very people who can talk to you about your business and challenge you about how you should be looking at it. So really great team. Great. Our CFO is actually in this area as well. So
what's it been like in offices across the world? And now, as Connecticut is starting to reopen, and you have multiple locations, what does that look like?
What you mean in terms of people going back into the office?
Yeah, like have you seen that? For example, in the UK, are they already back where we're starting to talk about being back? And how does that impact?
Yeah, so the guys in the UK are kind of funny because I think they were at their wits' end being at home, so they just decided to go back in. So the guys are in the UK office, and I just think that people like to be with the conversations. There's value there, right? Hyderabad, we've had some delay there. I think that the coronavirus had peaked unexpectedly there. We actually have 2 guys. We train our Hyderabad team. They come into the UK and we rotate them through. And 2 of the guys in the UK are stuck. So we're trying really hard to get them home. And then right now, we've been virtual. We were getting together, but we've waited for that. But we will eventually, hopefully next year, have an office. I mean, Hyderabad, I think about 8.5 hour difference.
Okay.
From us, from UK, it's a lot easier, but, team meetings are tough. I feel bad for them. We start early, like 8 o'clock, but for them, it's quite late. but yeah, so we're managing, as Frank said, we've been a virtual organization, we started that way. And I think we are just very well trained on communication. It's funny. The only other thing I would say with the whole coronavirus, we never used, we always use Zoom, We never used video. And now we use video.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing how much better it makes
Yeah,
communication. We're
it
playing
is.
with we were trying today some collaboration software to do whiteboards and stuff. So we're still kind of working on that ourselves. Just in terms of your position in Connecticut.
Yeah.
First off, InsurTech, interesting word, right, Frank?
Yeah.
What is it exactly, other than companies started before a certain date? And you've been at this a while. Wendy, first of all, what's your perspective on what is InsurTech, what is not, and then you must be like one of the biggest companies here, startups actually in this field in Connecticut right now, in the Hartford area. Am I far off base from that?
Yeah, I really, go ahead, Frank. Did you
No,
want to?
I would say OWIT Global is one of the largest software development shops that I'm working with. I have contracts with 8 startups now in various sectors of the insurance technology space. And OWIT Global is the largest by far.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting, this whole InsurTech thing. That's how Frank and I kind of got back together again,
Yeah.
because we've known each other, and then we reconnected when InsurTech Hartford started. He had brought me in to potentially be a mentor because I was consulting, and I was like, what is this thing? It's like, to me, it's just a bunch of startup companies. It's insurance technology. It's been around forever. What the heck,
Indeed.
So I had a really hard time wrapping my head around it. So I'm not really sure. I think everyone has a different definition. Are we a startup company? Yeah, we're a startup company. We're a mature startup company. We've been down this road before. We know the business. We know where the gaps are. We know how to develop the software specific for this industry because we know the industry and we know the processing and we know where the gaps are. So it's different. To me, some of the insurtechs are more great ideas, good to apply to the industry. Where can we get someone to look at it and get it to fit it in? Like maybe even something like, I don't know, Frank, Hi Marley was considered an insurtech at the time when they were doing the texting. Hi Marley.
Yes. And
Yeah.
there's the difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So in my experience, the vast majority of insurtechs are heavy tech, not so much insure.
Right.
And the insurtechs that I know that are successful are the ones that draw from veterans within the insurance space, and they implement using new technology. And that's the definition of what OWIT Global is.
Right.
And I have 3 or 4 others, you know them, Paul. The people from the insurance space, whether they came from insurance technology side or insurance business side, as the Hi Marley guys did primarily, you have an appreciation and understanding of the needs of the community. And so you're not just a technology company that pivoted to insurance because there was money there, okay? Any technology can be applied to insurance. Insurance and technology share the attribute that they hit every portion of our lives. So there isn't a technology around that you can't make InsurTech. But there's a big difference between companies that have institutional knowledge, veterans that are working with new technology to implement solutions. And that's what OWIT Global is.
Right. Well said, Frank.
Yeah. So let me ask you. So you're actually a startup with revenue.
Yeah.
Now this is
and
interesting.
We're very proud of that.
Yeah. So Laura and I have been talking to investors. There's a lot of interest in a lot of people who'd like to write some checks. Of course,
Yeah.
when you actually get there,
a lot of those guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your plans? What are your needs? Can you grow? Yeah.
Yeah. So we took in some investment capital this year, 2 tranches. The first one was a lot of the management team had reinvested in the company, which is great. It says a lot, that everybody believes in what they're doing. And then the second tranche was some existing investors along with some new investors. We are very conservative in how much money we're taking in. We want to add more value to our products. We want to add more logos. so that we can, grow, or, I guess more, sort of more
referenceable accounts.
Yeah, referenceable accounts, because we don't want to take in too much money too soon. Because sometimes I wonder, what would I do with all this money, right? What would I do? So the goal is, to get ourselves, to get more logos. I think we're going to have a really great year. That will give us momentum into next year, and hopefully the COVID thing we'll figure that part out until the next thing happens. So to try to gain some momentum, and then when we're at a particular point in time and we feel like now's the time to take in some more money, to really go at the product, or really go at whatever else our needs are, which we'll figure out, then we'll go out and we'll look for money. I was at the InsurTech Hartford meeting. It was in, I think, February, when I did the pitch there. And I came to your office, Paul, and I met with different investors. And basically, what I found was that most investors, they either, we're kind of an in-betweener stage, because we have revenue, right? But we're not too small. We're not small that we need a lot of money, and we're in between, and we're not ready to take a lot of money. So the plan is to get us to the point we can take, maybe we'll take a nice clip of money, and we'll be able to really accelerate into the business. So
well, one sort of well-known company in the P&C space just filed for an IPO yesterday. I think they are spending something like $180 million, on acquisition. I think they've got like a substantially less amount of money in income. Now, if they pull this IPO off successfully, is this a good thing or bad thing for investors from your perspective? Does this help you or hurt you as you're starting to raise money in the future?
I don't really think about that stuff. I just really focus on what we're doing and just keep our heads down and move it along. I don't really think about it. I mean, is that a terrible thing to say? We just really are highly focused on, doing what we're doing and doing it well so that we can grow. I think the money will be there. We don't necessarily talk today about exit strategies and the amount of money that we want to take in or anything like that. We're just really truly focused on, good implementations. There's a lot of software products out there, and where they fail is on implementation, right? We really want to focus on execution, good products, good execution, and just, and we'll see where it goes. We love what we do. We love what we do. We have great people.
Yep.
Great board members. We have a great support. The board is helping us all the time, open doors, have conversations with people. And I think what really makes us excited too is the fact that you have a conversation with a prospect, and when they get it, that aha moment, oh my God, I totally get this. That's the best feeling, because we really need to educate people on microservices. And in the value proposition is that we're selling insurance specific microservices. So there's content in there to leverage.
That's great.
So, I would say, Paul, the thing I love about OWIT Global, it was alluded to by Wendy when she said that the officers, the managers, reinvested in the company as part of the first tranche this year. So they very clearly want to control their own destiny, and they want to benefit from it. Yeah. So if that IPO turns out to be a profitable company that knows how to execute post-money event, then there'll be money out there for an IPO like that in the future. And maybe 5 years from now, that'll be exactly what OWIT Global needs. And those senior veterans, the brain trust behind OWIT Global, will be able to cash a nice big check and retire.
Right, and then I can do this podcast from somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. Well, just send Laura and me some shares. So, Laura, what are the questions we have for him today?
My colleague actually just stopped by. You may have seen his.
Yes, we saw him.
Yeah, he actually came by and he said, "Oh, I want that." It's interesting. Something you had said earlier it made me think about Hartford and the connections on a human level, right? So we're all been virtual for the last few months now. I remember when we were saying days and then weeks, and now we're months. But extending legacy through connections, I think it's interesting because in so many ways, it's development, it's code, it's software, and yet it's people. So I'm curious, and as we've seen the Hartford ecosystem grow, and whether or not InsurTech is a thing or is not a thing, it's interesting to see the legacy individuals stay through, make connections like you and Frank are doing, and kind of lay down roots and help to grow the larger ecosystem. So I'd say it's something that we've been able to watch, and I'm curious to see where it's going to continue to go and grow.
Yeah, I mean, we have an incredible industry. The hardest part, as Frank was talking about when I was at Duck Creek, getting a new concept into the industry is a really challenging thing to do. And you have to get up every day and say, okay, I'm going to do this today, right? And at the end of the day, you might have a good day, you might have a bad day, that kind of thing. And I think, that's where we're at, pushing the boulder up the hill until everyone really, embraces the concepts and understands it. But what the nice thing about being my age is, at this point in my career, is that I have an incredible network of people that will have a conversation with me. I'm not asking them to buy the product. I'm asking them to learn about what we're doing, what their options are. And then if it piques their interest, let me give you a demo, let's talk about it. But the network of people, just amazing people, whether they're even other vendors. I mean, I was competing against, Insurity and Instech and, and then I remember when Guywire started as a claim system and, all those people, they're not enemies. They're
colleagues.
They're great people, really good people in the industry. So that's like, reconnecting with Frank all these years later has been wonderful. So, yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for the time. And Wendy, how if people want to find out more about your company, what's the best way to get in touch with you or your company?
Yeah, so I would say go to the website. It's www.owitglobal.com. There's a contact us form if you're looking to talk to someone in the UK or the EMEA space. There's a phone number there, and also our phone number at in Connecticut. And I think you can also email me at wendy@owitglobal.com. That'd be great. Thank you.
Or go to LinkedIn. She's the only Wendy Aarons-Corman
in the
entire LinkedIn.
You got to do some marketing for me, Frank.
All right. Well, listen, thanks so much. And let's see, all of you, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
See you, Wendy.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.